Men over 50, the top 5 foods for testosterone and lifelong bedroom vitality. Gentlemen, let me start with a hard truth. By the time most men hit 50, nearly half of their testosterone is gone. Half. That's not just about performance. It's about strength, energy, mood, even your ability to think clearly. And here's the kicker, it doesn't have to be this way. Forget the hype about expensive pills and miracle supplements. Science now shows that certain everyday foods, yes, foods you can buy at any grocery store, can raise testosterone by 15, even 20% in just a few weeks. That's the difference between feeling tired, weak, and checked out and feeling alive, powerful, and confident again. And here's where it gets interesting. Some of the very foods you were told to avoid for decades, like eggs, turn out to be among the strongest testosterone boosters on the planet. Imagine that. The advice you thought was protecting you may have actually been draining your vitality. I've spent over 30 years treating men in their 60s, 70s, even 80s. I've seen men who thought their best days were behind them, men who felt invisible, completely transformed just by fueling their bodies with the right foods. More strength, more energy, more drive in the gym, and yes, more fire in the bedroom. So let me ask you, are you ready to take back control of your hormones, your health, and your manhood without a prescription? If so, stay with me because what I'm about to share could change the way you age. But before we jump in, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with a friend who needs it. That's how we keep bringing you cutting-edge, science-backed advice to keep men strong for life. Now, let's dive into the top 5 foods for men over 50. And fair warning, the very first one on this list has been unfairly demonized for years. But when you hear the science, you'll never look at it the same way again. Why testosterone matters more than ever after 50. Gentlemen, before we get into the foods that can help, let's take a moment to understand why testosterone matters so much, especially after the age of 50. Too many people think of testosterone as nothing more than the sex hormone, but the truth is, it's the foundation of a man's health. It preserves muscle so you can stay strong. It keeps bones dense so you don't break them from a simple fall. It fuels your metabolism so fat doesn't pile up around your waist. It sharpens your thinking and keeps your mood steady. And yes, it keeps intimacy alive. Without enough of it, everything feels harder. Here's the reality. After 30, testosterone drops about 1% every year. That doesn't sound like much, but by 60 most men have lost nearly half of their youthful levels. The American Journal of Medicine reports that about 40% of men over 60 have clinically low testosterone, and by 70, more than half of men fall into that category. This decline shows up in everyday life. Less muscle, more belly fat, constant fatigue, brain fog, restless nights, mood swings, and for many a quiet but painful decline in bedroom performance and desire. Now let me ask you, have you noticed changes like these in your own life? Maybe climbing stairs feels tougher. Maybe your drive to take on new projects has slipped. Maybe your energy just isn't what it used to be. These are not random signs of aging. They are often signals that your testosterone is running low. The Massachusetts Male Aging Study, one of the largest of its kind, confirmed that these changes start showing up in men as early as their 40s and accelerate with each passing decade if nothing is done. But here's the hopeful part. Your body has not forgotten how to make testosterone. The factory is still there. The brain, the testes, the hormones that signal production, they all know what to do. What they need are the raw materials and the right conditions. Think of it like running an engine. If you don't give it oil, fuel, and maintenance, it sputters and slows down. But with the right inputs, it runs smoothly even as the miles add up. For testosterone, those inputs are things like zinc, magnesium, vitamin D, healthy fats, regular movement, quality sleep, and lower stress. I remember a patient of mine, Richard, a retired firefighter in his mid-60s. He came to me frustrated, tired, heavier than he used to be, and struggling with intimacy. His lab work confirmed his testosterone was on the low side, but not beyond repair. Instead of rushing to medication, we focused on diet, exercise, and sleep. Within 6 months, his testosterone rose naturally by nearly 20%, his weight dropped, and his wife told me she felt like she had her husband back. That's what happens when you support the body instead of accepting decline as destiny. So let me leave you with this question. If your body already knows how to produce testosterone, what would happen if you finally gave it the building blocks it's been missing? What would your life look like if you had more strength, more clarity, more confidence? Not just for today, but for the years ahead. The answer begins with the choices you make every single day, and food is where that journey starts. The science of testosterone and food. Think of testosterone production like running a factory. Your brain is the manager, constantly sending instructions, while your testicles are the workers on the floor, responsible for turning raw materials into finished product. But here's the catch. If you don't supply the factory with the raw materials it needs, production slows down. Zinc, vitamin D, magnesium, healthy fats, amino acids, these are the building blocks. Without them, the factory sputters. And if you throw in stress, poor sleep, processed food, and a sedentary lifestyle, you're basically cutting the power to the factory altogether. Now, science has shown just how powerful lifestyle changes can be. A landmark study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found that overweight men who lost just 10% of their body weight saw a 15% boost in testosterone levels. Just think about that. Without a single pill or injection, their bodies naturally turn the dial back up. Another large study from the University of Sydney discovered that men who regularly ate diets filled with processed sugar and trans fats had testosterone levels up to 20% lower than men who ate nutrient-rich whole foods. Diet alone was enough to flip the switch. But the evidence doesn't stop there. Research from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition has shown that men who follow a Mediterranean-style diet, high in vegetables, healthy fats, and lean proteins, consistently have higher testosterone levels and better metabolic health compared to those eating a Western diet heavy in refined carbs and fried foods. And in 2020, the European Journal of Endocrinology published data showing that vitamin D deficiency, which is shockingly common in older men, is strongly linked to low testosterone. When men corrected that deficiency, their hormone levels often improved. So let me ask you, what does your factory look like right now? Are you giving it the resources it needs, or are you starving it of fuel? When you sit down to a meal, is that meal helping your body produce strength, energy, and vitality, or is it shutting the system down one bite at a time? As a doctor, I've seen this play out hundreds of times. A man comes in complaining of fatigue, low drive, or weight gain. He assumes the answer is medication, but often the real problem is that his diet has been starving his hormones for years. Once we shift his meals toward foods rich in the key nutrients, like zinc, magnesium, and healthy fats, the body responds. Energy comes back, muscle feels easier to maintain, and yes, bedroom performance improves. The conclusion is simple but powerful. Your diet is either turning testosterone production on or off. There's very little middle ground, which means every decision at the grocery store, every choice at the dinner table, is either helping your hormones or hurting them. So the real question becomes, if food has this much power over your hormones, why not use it to your advantage? Why not give your body the exact tools it needs to keep producing the hormone that makes you strong, confident, and alive? That's why in the next chapter, we'll look at the top 5 foods that provide those raw materials and help keep your testosterone factory running at full speed. Food number 5, eggs, the nutrient powerhouse. For decades, eggs were unfairly blamed for heart disease. Doctors told men to skip the yolks and stick to egg whites, warning that cholesterol was dangerous. But over the last 20 years, science has rewritten that story. Today, we know that eggs, especially the yolks, are one of the most nutrient-dense foods a man can eat, and they play a critical role in supporting testosterone. Here's why. Testosterone is made from cholesterol. Without cholesterol, your body cannot produce this hormone. And eggs, particularly the yolk, provide the perfect balance of healthy cholesterol, vitamins, and minerals that older men need. They contain vitamin D, which is essential for hormone production and often deficient in men over 50. They provide zinc, one of the most important minerals for male reproductive health. And they are rich in choline, a nutrient that supports brain function, liver health, and nerve signaling. When you think about it, an egg contains everything needed to grow life, so it makes sense that it also contains what your body needs to stay vital. The science is clear. A 2011 study in the Asian Journal of Andrology found that men who consumed higher amounts of cholesterol within safe ranges had significantly higher testosterone levels compared to men on low-fat diets. Another study showed that men who ate whole eggs after resistance training had a 40% greater testosterone response than those who only ate egg whites. The yolk, long criticized, turned out to be the very part of the egg that gave men their edge. I've seen this firsthand in my practice. Alan, a 62-year-old patient, came to me frustrated with fatigue and low drive. He proudly told me he had cut out yolks for years, eating nothing but egg whites because he thought it was the healthy choice. When I explained the role cholesterol plays in hormone production and encouraged him to reintroduce whole eggs, his energy began to change. Within weeks, he felt more alert in the mornings, his workouts improved, and even his mood lifted. His wife later told me she noticed the difference before he did. Sometimes the simplest changes make the biggest impact. And Alan's story isn't unique. Another patient, Thomas, 68, had been dealing with memory lapses and a general sense of mental fog. His diet was low in healthy fats, and he rarely ate eggs. Once he began eating 2 pasture-raised eggs each morning, lightly scrambled in olive oil, he not only reported more consistent energy, but his focus sharpened as well. Choline, abundant in egg yolks, plays a vital role in neurotransmitter function, and Thomas swore his memory improved after the change. So let me ask you, are you still living under the old fear of cholesterol, avoiding one of nature's most complete foods? Or are you giving your body the raw materials it desperately needs to keep testosterone production strong? Here's my advice as a physician. Enjoy 2 to 3 whole eggs a day, preferably pasture-raised or omega-3 enriched. Cook them gently, boiled, poached, or lightly scrambled in olive oil to preserve their nutrients. Pair them with vegetables like spinach or tomatoes, and you'll have a powerhouse meal that fuels both your body and your hormones. Eggs are not the enemy. In fact, for men over 50, they may be one of the simplest, most affordable, and most effective ways to keep the testosterone factory running. Food number 4, spinach, the green hormone booster. Spinach may not be the first food that comes to mind when we talk about testosterone, but the truth is, Popeye was onto something long before science caught up. Spinach is loaded with magnesium, one of the most important minerals for male health, and studies show a direct link between magnesium and higher testosterone. A 2011 study published in Biological Trace Element Research found that men who increased their magnesium intake for just 4 weeks raised their free testosterone levels, and the effect was even greater in men who exercised regularly. Magnesium works by lowering the binding activity of SHBG, a protein that locks testosterone away. In other words, magnesium helps free up more of the testosterone you already have so your body can actually use it. Spinach also brings another advantage: nitrates. These naturally occurring compounds improve blood flow by helping blood vessels relax and widen. For a man over 50, better circulation is not just important for exercise performance, it's essential for bedroom performance too. In fact, a review published in the Journal of Nutrition showed that diets high in leafy greens rich in nitrates were associated with improved vascular health and lower risk of erectile dysfunction. I've seen the difference this makes in real life. Robert, a 67-year-old patient of mine, came in with low testosterone and the early stages of erectile dysfunction. Rather than reaching for medication right away, we focused on his diet. He began adding a large handful of spinach into his omelets in the morning and blending it into smoothies in the afternoon, along with pumpkin seeds for extra magnesium. Within a few months, his blood flow improved, his energy returned, and his confidence in the bedroom followed. His wife later told me it felt like they had turned back the clock. Another man, David, 71, had been struggling with constant fatigue and restless nights. His blood tests revealed magnesium deficiency, which is more common than most men realize, especially with age. After adding spinach and other magnesium-rich foods like almonds and black beans into his daily meals, he noticed not only better energy but also deeper, more restful sleep. That's another benefit of magnesium. It calms the nervous system and supports high-quality sleep, which in turn helps testosterone production. So let me ask you, how often does spinach make its way onto your plate? Is it something you reach for daily, or is it still just the garnish on the side? The reality is, it's one of the simplest, cheapest, and most effective foods you can eat to give your hormones and your circulation a boost. My advice is simple. Aim for at least 1 serving of spinach every day. Toss it into an omelet, blend it into a smoothie, or sauté it lightly with olive oil and garlic to enhance absorption. Pairing it with a healthy fat helps your body unlock even more of its nutrients. If you do this consistently, you'll be giving your body one of the key tools it needs to keep testosterone active, blood flowing, and vitality alive well into your later years. Food number 3, oysters, the king of zinc. For centuries, oysters have carried a reputation as an aphrodisiac, and modern science has finally explained why. They are the single richest natural source of zinc, and zinc happens to be the mineral most directly tied to testosterone production. Without enough zinc, the enzymes that convert cholesterol into testosterone can't do their job. That means even if your body has the raw materials, production slows to a crawl. Research published in the journal Nutrition showed just how dramatic this can be. Young men who restricted their zinc intake saw their testosterone levels drop by nearly 50% in only 20 weeks. On the other hand, men who were already zinc deficient and then added more zinc nearly doubled their testosterone. That's how powerful this single nutrient can be. The importance of zinc doesn't stop with testosterone. It also plays a role in sperm health, muscle repair, and immune function. Men who are deficient often complain of fatigue, poor recovery after exercise, and reduced drive. The problem is, zinc deficiency is far more common than most people realize, especially in older men whose bodies don't absorb minerals as efficiently as they used to. I've seen this firsthand in my practice. James, a 71-year-old patient, once told me he felt like his vitality had been quietly switched off. His labs confirmed what I suspected. His zinc levels were low. We added oysters to his diet along with other zinc-rich foods like beef and pumpkin seeds. Within a few months, his energy returned, his workouts felt stronger, and he described a spark in the bedroom that he thought was long gone. Another patient, Mark, 65, struggled with constant colds and lingering fatigue. His diet lacked seafood and red meat, and his blood work showed zinc deficiency. After making small but consistent changes, adding oysters once a week and a handful of pumpkin seeds daily, he not only felt healthier but noticed his mood and drive improved as well. So ask yourself this. Are you giving your body enough of the minerals it needs to keep testosterone production steady, or are you quietly starving that system without realizing it? The good news is that adding zinc is simple. Fresh oysters once or twice a week are ideal, but canned oysters in olive oil can work too. If seafood isn't an option, pumpkin seeds, lean beef, and even chickpeas are good secondary sources. For men over 50, the message is clear. Zinc is not optional, it's essential. And oysters, nature's most concentrated source, remain the king when it comes to restoring what age and diet may have slowly taken away. Food number 2, extra virgin olive oil, the testosterone fuel. Olive oil has long been praised for heart health, but what many men don't realize is that it's just as powerful for hormone health. A 2013 study published in Natural Product Communications found that men who consumed extra virgin olive oil daily saw their testosterone rise by as much as 20% in only 3 weeks. That's a dramatic improvement in a very short time without medication or supplements, just by changing the type of fat they used every day. The reason olive oil works so well comes down to its unique nutrients. It's loaded with monounsaturated fats, the same type found in avocados and nuts, which serve as the raw material for hormone production. It also contains powerful antioxidants like polyphenols and vitamin E that protect the Leydig cells in the testicles, the very cells responsible for producing testosterone. On top of that, olive oil reduces oxidative stress and inflammation, two silent killers of hormone health that become more common as we age. When inflammation is high, testosterone production slows, and when oxidative stress damages the cells, your factory can't keep up. Olive oil shields those cells and keeps production steady. Other research has reinforced this. A study in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition showed that men who followed a Mediterranean-style diet, rich in olive oil, vegetables, and lean proteins, had higher testosterone levels and better metabolic health than men eating diets full of refined carbs and processed oils. Another trial in Spain linked higher olive oil intake with improved blood vessel function, which not only supports heart health, but also improves circulation where men need it most. I've seen these results firsthand. George, one of my patients at 74, decided to swap butter and processed vegetable oils for extra virgin olive oil. Within 6 months, his lab work showed not only higher testosterone, but also improved cholesterol numbers and better blood pressure. More importantly, George told me he felt like himself again, stronger, more energetic, and more engaged with life. Another patient, Michael, 68, had been dealing with stubborn belly fat and low energy. When he committed to using 2 to 3 tablespoons of olive oil daily in place of margarine and fried foods, he noticed a real change. His waistline shrank, his energy picked up, and his morning vitality returned. So let me ask you, what kind of oil is fueling your body right now? Is it processed, refined oils that inflame your system, or is it the kind of oil that actively supports your hormones and longevity? The choice you make when you cook, dress a salad, or dip bread can either quietly erode your vitality or strengthen it. My advice is simple. Make extra virgin olive oil your go-to fat. Use it as your primary oil for cooking on low to medium heat. Drizzle it over salads, or use it as a dip for vegetables. Aim for 2 to 3 tablespoons a day, consistently. For men over 50, this is one of the easiest, most effective daily habits to keep testosterone levels strong and protect long-term health. Food number 1, pomegranate, the ancient vitality fruit. When it comes to foods that boost testosterone and vitality, few men think of pomegranate, yet it may be the most powerful of them all. This fruit has been a symbol of strength and fertility for thousands of years, and now modern science explains why. A 2012 study from the University of Edinburgh found that men who drank pure pomegranate juice every day for just 2 weeks increased their testosterone levels by an average of 24%. The men also reported feeling more positive, more energetic, and more interested in intimacy. That's an impressive shift in such a short time. The secret lies in pomegranate's incredible concentration of polyphenols, potent antioxidants that protect the very cells in the testes responsible for producing testosterone. These compounds also improve blood flow by supporting the lining of blood vessels and reducing arterial plaque, which is critical for both heart health and sexual performance. In fact, research in the International Journal of Impotence Research showed that men with mild to moderate erectile dysfunction who drank pomegranate juice experienced measurable improvements in function and satisfaction. This isn't magic, it's simply nutrition working the way it's supposed to. I've seen men surprised by just how much difference this fruit can make. Henry, a 69-year-old patient of mine, was skeptical when I suggested adding pure pomegranate juice to his routine. He tried it for 6 weeks, 4 ounces a day. The first call I got wasn't from him, but from his wife. She thanked me laughing because she had noticed the change before he did. Another patient, Charles, 72, had struggled with sluggish circulation and low energy. After making pomegranate a daily habit, he reported sharper focus, better endurance during exercise, and a new level of confidence in the bedroom. So let me ask you, if a simple fruit can raise testosterone, improve circulation, and protect your heart at the same time, why wouldn't you make it a part of your daily routine? The key is to use it wisely. Skip the sugary blends on the supermarket shelf and go for pure, unsweetened pomegranate juice, about 4 to 6 ounces a day. Or better yet, eat the fresh seeds for the added fiber. Pair it with a handful of nuts, or a salad for a satisfying, nutrient-dense snack. For men over 50, pomegranate is more than just a fruit. It's a natural way to reclaim strength, energy, and vitality, with benefits that touch nearly every aspect of health. Sometimes the most overlooked foods turn out to be the most powerful. So there you have it, 5 simple foods that can make a dramatic difference in a man's life after 50. Eggs, spinach, oysters, olive oil, and pomegranate. None of them are exotic, none of them require a prescription, and yet together they provide the raw materials, the circulation, and the protection your body needs to keep testosterone strong and vitality alive. Here's what I want you to remember. Aging doesn't have to mean decline. Your body hasn't forgotten how to make testosterone. It just needs the right fuel. The right foods can sharpen your mind, strengthen your muscles, improve your mood, and yes, restore confidence in the bedroom. These changes are real, they're backed by science, and I've seen them transform men time and time again. I know many of you watching may have wondered if your best days are behind you. Let me tell you, they're not. With the right daily habits, you can add years of energy, strength, and passion to your life. And it all starts with the choices you make at the dinner table. If this video gave you new insight, do me a favor, hit that like button, share it with a friend who could use this information, and subscribe to the channel. That's what helps us keep creating videos that matter, videos that can change lives. Thank you for watching, gentlemen. Take care of your health, take pride in your strength, and never stop investing in yourself. I'll see you in the next video, where we'll dive even deeper into natural ways to keep men strong, sharp, and vital for life.